We're back with the Creepy Show with your hosts Aaron and John and our guest Melissa.
Just a second, I thought we were creepy show.
We're going to try different things out.
Featuring Melissa.
Yeah. But today we're going to be covering an article I found on the internet about the Lincoln Assassination. It is on a site called history.com. It was posted April 14th, 2015 by Christopher Klein. The article is 10 Things You May Not Know About the Lincoln Assassination. Aaron, what's one thing people might not know about the Lincoln Assassination?
Oh, God. Well, one thing people might not know. Like I said, we've discussed before, Edward Booth saving Robert Lincoln's life. That's basically John Wilkes Booth's older brother saving the president's son from an accident at a train railway station. There's that. There's all kinds of weird. Edwin Booth was really haunted by this. There's John Wilkes Booth's brother, who he disagreed with violently politically. They hadn't spoken to each other for a couple of years. He was also an actor, and a very revered actor in New York. But what else might not you know about it? Well, this was originally... It started off, I guess, Booth seemed to think that he had some kind of sanction from the Confederate government.
Well, yeah, wasn't that supposedly given to him by that Stanton character?
Okay. Well, this is which conspiracy theory you want to follow. Okay, if we're going to talk about conspiracy theories, which I prefer over the article, because I thought the article was kind of weak.
Okay.
But anyway...
Well, we didn't really get into the in-depth discussion.
Well, those were just like little tidbits that don't get, they're interesting and they fill in some detail, but I don't think they advance knowledge much.
Okay.
But to talk about the conspiracies around the Lincoln assassination, yes, presidential assassination conspiracy theories did not start with John Kennedy. Matter of fact, they go back all the way to the first recorded assassination attempt, which was when a English house painter pulled two pistols on Andrew Jackson on the steps of the Capitol and fired both at him. They both misfired. Jackson, being a bit of a badass in his own right, proceeded to start beating the guy to death with his walking stick. However, a number of senators and other such people were able to pull them apart and save the man's life. He was found to be insane. But of course, there was people thinking, no, he's not. He's an Englishman. They're trying to conquer us again. So,
all right.
Yeah, that among other weird theories. But the Kennedy one, we forget right now. And among the things that is a very deep thread through all this is the anti-Catholicism that was in America at that time. It was a very...
But JFK himself was, in fact, a Catholic, wasn't he?
Right, that's only 100 years later after what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
And there still was, because at the time of Lincoln, Catholic couldn't have been elected. Matter of fact, maybe at the time of Roosevelt, a Catholic couldn't have been elected. Because they were just viewed with such suspicion. They were, how some people say you can't trust the Jews because Israel controls them all?
Yeah.
Well, the idea back then, maybe with a little bit more justification, you can't control the Catholics because they all answer to Rome. And that was the idea. There's this foreign power that was going to someday rise up and overthrow America, all these Catholics, and make us a Catholic nation, and this, that, and the other. This was the theory, the paranoia that went on with it. And this was a very... The prejudice, just to give you an idea, and this would get stirred up sometimes historically. The prejudice, see, you've probably... Well, hell, you might not have heard of the Mexican-American War. No, just the Mexican War, excuse me. In the 1830s, this is when the Marines went to the halls of Montezuma. And it's a pretty ineffectual thing, but in the midst of that war, there was an Irish battalion in the American Army that, due to all the crap they were getting for being Catholics, deserted en masse and joined the Mexican Army. The Brigade San Patricio, St. Patrick's Brigade.
Yeah.
And, of course, at the end of the war, they were all executed by the American Army for deserting in the face of the enemy.
Damn.
Yeah. And but, again, that gives you an idea that they would run that risk just, to get out, to make a stand and stand with fellow Catholics against this type of thing. So there's a lot of anti-Catholicism that goes through the Lincoln conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Now, aside from from the idea that the Pope did it.
Wait, that the Pope himself during the time?
No, not the Pope, but the Pope was pulling the strings.
Okay.
Or the head of the Jesuit order. Okay, that's the one theory. Now that's the obvious theory on it. But the Confederacy, the Democratic Party at that time was considered the party of Romanism and rebellion. Because they stood against prohibition, so they supported alcohol, by the other hand. Romanism because they did embrace the Catholic immigrant vote, the Irish and Italian votes and such that were coming in. And rebellion, the Democratic Party was the party of the Confederacy during the Civil War.
So these guys really must not have been down with the prohibition that kicked down, huh?
No. Well, again, this is a lot later. Prohibition, another great story. But we have all these things going. So now whenever there's someone who had a Catholic education or something, and the fact that John Surratt, after it all, he was the son of Mary Surratt and possibly a Confederate intelligence agent. Anyway, after all this he was involved in the opening stages of the conspiracy. He ended up hiding out in the Vatican as a papal suave, as one of the guards there. And so anyway, that was a thing. Another thing, everyone said, "Oh, you see, he's hiding in the Pope's." But anyway, so with all of this going on, and there's anti-Masonry going on at this time, but Abraham Lincoln is, he was killed. We know that.
Yes.
No spoilers there. And there was
He lived for a little bit after that, though, too, didn't he?
He lived till the end of the night.
Like he was in a kind of comatose state.
Yeah, basically it took him that long for his brain to tell his heart to stop beating.
Yeah.
But my guess was the thing. We'll have a doctor look at those reports and tell me.
Probably.
But yeah, he was dead by the next morning. But anyway.
Well, the thing is, there are some theories that he lived for some time after that, but not... Like he'd had the bullet pulled, but he died later on, having been put into hiding for the assassination in the first place.
Oh, really? Okay, I've never heard that. I have never heard that. It's kind of like the idea of John Kennedy surviving on his own private island.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Biggie and Tupac are hanging out with Abe.
But yeah, continuing on with the others.
So when he's killed, the first thing everyone thinks is, bear in mind the Civil War's been over for a couple of days at this point. It's, basically, what is it, a week or two? The Civil War was just over, so the initial idea is that this was something the Confederate government did, stinging like a dead wasp, trying to take out their enemy and maybe get some life back in their forces there at the very end. And this was holding that, Jefferson Davis thought it up, and with Thad Stevens and Judah P. Benjamin, yada, 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 and all these guys put it together, sent John Surratt up there, who put this, that was that theory. There's never really been anything to support that. The most probable theory is the simple conspiracy theory, which is John Wilkes Booth, at least believing he had sanction, or at least up to a point at least, starts off first with his kidnapping plan, then with the murder plan. And this thing, you can, read Booth's, all of his writings and stuff. He really hated Lincoln. He really did. He actually was standing, and you can see him in one of the pictures of Lincoln giving his second inaugural address.
Plug that in? John, can we swap cords? Because that black one is longer.
Mel, ladies and gentlemen, Mel.
And it stretched longer, it still charges fine. It has nothing to do with not being used. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I won't bump you as much, maybe.
Everybody, Mel, give him a big...
Because I gotta be right here, you know what I'm saying?
Special guest, Mel. Okay.
Thank you.
You might...
I appreciate it. Okay.
Okay, it's enough curtain calls. We got limited time here. She might be back. So anyway, he puts together, so Booth puts together his conspiracy. And this is basically kind of it's not the A-team. As is usual with these things, you have one charismatic figure. And John Wilkes Booth was nothing if not charismatic. Somebody, in today's terms, he might be Tom Cruise. You might think of him. He's an actor. Everyone knows who he is. He's a huge star in his field. He's got really nothing to prove, but he's kind of weird. So that was kind of how they thought of John Wilkes Booth.
I don't know. I don't think John Wilkes Booth would have gone along with the whole Scientology thing, buddy.
I don't know. Maybe it would have been just his thing. As long as they didn't let black folks in, he might have liked it. Man was a racist.
Oh, well.
I don't think I'm letting anything out of the bag with that either.
Never mind.
What?
Nothing. I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I just was stuck for a second.
Okay.
In the seat.
Oh. Okay.
I panicked.
Did I point out that that we are recording this in the studio on wheels?
Oh my gosh, we are?
Yeah.
That's why that's what I'm doing that. We have an audience I'm trying to keep apprised of what's going on here.
Alright.
This is the Mel Cottage on wheels.
I have headphones and that's why I didn't know you guys were together. I'll take them out.
Anyway. So he's putting together his team. He's got guys, George Azeroth. Okay, Lewis Powell, Lewis Payne, either way. A very good-looking guy, but again, considered a violent, possibly insane racist. Azeroth, and I forget... I can't remember any of these. Oh, David Harold, who was definitely not firing on all cylinders as far as the brain went. I believe he was the one who's described as very, very... No. Oh, okay, and maybe I'm not. Anyway, I'm forgetting everything. I'm forgetting the details, but basically we're not the A-team. These are minor players. And so when the thing comes, this is a plan to decapitate the Northern government he's got. Eventually says, okay, we're going to shoot Lincoln. The vice president, he sent, I believe, David Harold off to attack him. I forget who Azeroth was sent after. And Lewis Payne was going after the Secretary of State, Lewis Stanton. Now, Azeroth barged his way into the house. I mean, not Azeroth, but Lewis Payne, or Powell, his name changes, barges in to the thing where the Secretary of State was recovering from a carriage accident and was in bed with broken bones and wearing a huge brace to let his bones heal. So Powell charges into the house, fights his way past two of Seward's sons, cutting one of them up really badly in the process because he's carrying a knife. He pistol whipped him with his gun. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was the deal. Pistol whipped the son, went upstairs, tried to shoot Stanton, but the gun jammed because he messed it up. Yeah. So he pulled a knife, stabbed him many, many times, and the only reason he didn't die from it was that brace he was wearing acted as a shield. He was cut pretty badly, but he survived. No
really major injuries from it?
No, just bleeding. Oh, I mean, you have to bear in mind that this is 1865.
Oh, man, he didn't get any vital organs or anything.
No, exactly.
Okay,
exactly. That probably would have killed him.
I imagine getting stabbed with a knife in the 1860s would get you killed. Do you know what the healthcare was like back then, bro?
Do you know what the knives looked like? No, healthcare, this is before they even thought that washing hands between surgery was a good idea. Oh, yeah. So, okay, and then the one, I forget if it was Harold or Azeroth who was supposed to kill Andrew Johnson, the vice president. He decides he needs one more drink before doing that, and then one more drink, and next thing you know, there's no way he's getting near anybody. Yeah. Speaking of the one more drink, what do you call it? John Wilkes Booth was sitting across the street from Ford's Theater, drinking up some Dutch courage to be ready to do this.
Let us not forget the bodyguard who...
Right, Lincoln's bodyguard who'd been sent to basically stand in the hallway outside the presidential box and make sure nobody walked in. After the play started, figured, well, no big deal, I'll pop across for a wee nip. So he was across the street having a drink too. Might have actually passed Booth on the road who was walking over. Probably not staggering too badly. And he comes up the stairs, Booth does, behind him. He drilled a little hole in the door so he could look in to see what was going on. So he does that, looks through there. There's Lincoln. And he opens the door very softly. And he's standing there, and he's got a little, I think a 44 caliber single-shot Derringer. A little tiny gun, it can fit in your hand easy. and fires a pretty heavy ball.